So, before we start talking about any of the programming languages, let's, first of all, understand the structure of the Salesforce apps, or the framework basically on which the Salesforce.com apps are built. So this has a, very simple and a very common framework which we might have heard earlier as well, which is called MVC framework, right? Any ideas on what is an MVC framework? Anyone?
It's a model view controller.
Model view controller. Okay. So, Vanita, do you have any understanding of what is this model view controller?
Yeah, model represents data model and view represents user interface. Controller represents business logic.
Okay, very good. Vanita, your understanding?
Yes, I understand.
You understand model view controller? Okay. So,
Yes, I know.
a very simple framework which has 3 layers, alright. So in these 3 layers, one is the data model, one is the front-end user interface, and the third is the business logics or any code or program or set of instructions that lies in the controller layer. So controller is basically the controlling logics. Okay. Now Salesforce also has the same framework. We have model. So we have seen the data model at the back end. We have objects, and then we have fields and the relationships, and everything is there in the data model. For the view, Salesforce by default provides us the page layouts. We have dealt with page layouts and tabs there, right? So it's by default there. View is provided by default. However, in case we want some enhanced UI, user interface, as per our requirement, and we want to just control the look and feel and the interactivity of the UI, then we can create our own user interfaces as well, right? So we have standard pages and we have the standard page layouts. In addition to that, we can have the complex and enhanced UIs and the customized UIs designed for ourselves or for our clients. And for that, we use the programming language which is called Visualforce. Okay, I'll come to that part. Controller, again, there are a lot of controlling logics which are there by default. The standard logics, there are standard validations, there are standard controllers. When you click on a save button, it goes and commits the record into the database. When you click on the edit button, it performs some action. So a lot of instructions are already there. But in case you want your own instructions to come and work there, that is where you can create your own controllers as well, right? So that's overall about our MVC framework thing, right? So in this, what we see, how to enhance the data model, that option we have seen, and that can be easily done using the drag and drop or the point and click options that we have seen, creating objects and fields and creating the relationships and the lookups and everything. So that's it. For enhancement of the view part, we have this Visualforce. So Visualforce is more of a markup language. I would call it as a programming language. So this is a markup language used for putting markups on the page or on the user interface, and it's very, very similar to HTML. Okay. The way it is written is very similar to HTML. HTML is again another markup language. So Visualforce is very similar to HTML. Along with being similar to HTML, it also uses some HTML tags as well, like the simple HTML tags, bold, italics, tables. So most of the HTML tags can be used within Visualforce pages. So it supports these HTML tags also. Okay, it also supports CSS and it supports JavaScript as well, right? We can use JavaScript on Visualforce page, you can use CSS on Visualforce page, and you can also use HTML tags on the Visualforce page. So that's it, right? So that is what we have for enhancement of the view. Now for the controller part, for writing your instructions or the logics, you need Apex. This is a proper programming language. Okay, and this is similar to Java. It's pretty similar to Java syntax wise, and it has all those oops concepts and stuff like that. And this is used for writing your all controlling logics. Okay, apart from this, we have two query languages which are used for querying the data. One is called SOQL, which is Salesforce Object Query Language, SOSL, which is called Salesforce Object Search Language. So these two languages are used for, these are again query languages used for querying the data from the database. SOQL is more used for querying the data from a specific location when you know that you have to fetch the data from which location. SOSL is used when you are not sure which table you want to fetch the data from. When you want to perform a search on the entire database, then you use SOSL. I'll talk about this in details in the sessions. So this is, these are, the programming languages which we are going to basically use here. So we'll start like this. We'll start with the Visualforce. Learn how to, design the Visualforce pages without any programming base, right? Only with the markups and with the standard controllers. Okay. Then we will get into Apex. We will learn basics of Apex, and we'll learn how can we create our own controllers for the Visualforce page. Then we will go and learn how we can use Apex completely on its own without a user interface, right? So that is how we are actually going to go about these things. So we'll start with the Visualforce thing today. Just give me one second. Let me open my presentation slide. Okay, so here we are on the Visualforce. Hope everyone can see my screen and I'm audible to everyone, right? In case you find any difficulty, or if
Yes.
you have any questions, please do not hesitate to stop me and ask. All right. So what is Visualforce? It's a framework that allows developers to build sophisticated custom user interfaces. That is what I was just talking about. That can be hosted natively on the Force.com platform. Now, important thing about Visualforce is this can be hosted natively on the Force.com platform. It is not something that you will host anywhere, right? So it has to be hosted on the Force.com platform. Okay. This Visualforce framework includes a tag-based markup language similar to HTML, right? So this as a tag-based markup language, this is again something which I just talked about. It's very, very similar to HTML, and the same concept of tags is also applicable in Visualforce. And in addition to that, we also use some of the HTML components here, right? So that's the basic of Visualforce. We just discussed about it. Now, in case you want to create a Visualforce page, or you want to start designing these custom interfaces of the Visualforce using the Visualforce, then what you have to do, you have to enable the Visualforce code editor. Okay. Visualforce code editor allows you to look into the code and edit the code, and parallelly look into the page as well, right? So before we start doing anything, before we start creating our page, we just have to do a small thing. And I'm assuming both of you have your developer editions, right? You both have your developer editions?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So let's quickly look into what exactly we need to do before we get started on the Visualforce. So before you start creating Visualforce page, you just have to make a small setup change on your personal settings so that you can view the code editor of the Visualforce page. So you just have to go and enable the Visualforce development mode. Till the time it's not enabled, you will not see the code editor. So this development mode embeds a Visualforce page editor in your browser. So it will embed the page editor within your browser. Okay, that allows you to see the code and preview the page at the same time. So that code editor will basically allow you to see the code and preview the page at the same time, so that you can keep on making the changes, and parallelly you can keep on viewing the page also. What changes are being made and how the page is looking, right? So to enable development mode, in case it's not enabled for you, just follow these steps. go to My Settings, Personal, Advanced User Details, and then click on Edit. Select the Development Mode checkbox and click on Save. Can we quickly do this? So if I have to show it to you, just give me a second. I might already have this enabled on this, but still you can just go to Setup or My Settings, whatever is applicable for your developer edition, and then under that you should go to your personal information and then click on Edit, and under Edit you should make sure that this box is checked on. Alright, that's it.
Okay.
Done. So that's one part. Now what does this enabling the development mode do? It gives you that page editor, Visualforce page editor in the browser. Within the browser itself you will have, I'll show it to you, you know what page editor we get. Okay. Now let's get started. So if we have understood how to enable the development mode, now we'll get started with creating our first Visualforce page. So let's get started with creating the first Visualforce page. There are two ways of creating a Visualforce page. Okay, one is the traditional way of creating a Visualforce page, the way you have created all these stuff. So like objects and tabs and the fields and stuff like that. So there is one way of creating it the same way. You go to Setup and then Develop Pages. Okay. So you can go to Setup, Develop Pages. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and click on a new page and start creating the page. So just give a label and a name for the page, give a description for the page, write the code for the page and stuff like that. So this is one way of doing it, but this is not the best way of creating a page. Okay, as a developer you should not take this approach for creating a page. So best way for creating a page would be for you as a developer to go to the URL. Okay, let me show you with an example here first and then we'll get into this. In your browser, add apex/page name to the URL after salesforce.com. Okay, so go to the URL, delete everything after salesforce.com, and then after that put a slash, then write apex, then put a slash, and then give the page name. Okay, for example, if this if this is your Salesforce instance, your URL should be like this. You should delete everything after salesforce.com and then put a slash and then write apex and then give another slash and write the page name. So for example, I just want to create it here. I should go to URL. Before you do this, please make sure that your development mode is enabled, right? And please don't create your own pages parallelly. Okay, I will keep on giving you assignments and I will give you time to do these things. Don't do it parallelly, just focus on how we are creating the page here. Okay, so you should delete everything after salesforce.com slash on the URL. Then you should put an apex, then give another slash and then write the page name. Page name can be anything, whatever you want, just that it cannot have spaces and it cannot have special characters. Right, so it cannot have any special character or space, and you can name it whatever you want. So let's say I want to name the page as J1. Press enter. That's it. So you just have to go ahead, delete everything after salesforce.com, put a slash, write apex, put another slash and give the page name, whatever page name you want to give. Press enter. It will throw you an error. What is the error? This page does not exist, which is quite okay. The page already does not exist, so it says that the page does not exist and it gives you an option to create the page. Alright, So we should ideally go and click on create page. So this will create this page for me. Got it? So you have successfully created your Visualforce page. This is how simple creating a Visualforce page is, right? Just go to the URL, delete everything after salesforce.com / put apex, then put a slash, and then write the page name. That's it. That is what you have to do. Nothing else. Okay. Now this is the page which you created. This is the content of the page. By default, it says congratulations, this is a new page. And this is the code editor. So here is the URL, here is my page, and here is the code editor. I was talking to you regarding this Visualforce page editor. This is the editor, which comes exactly at the bottom end. You can just click on it, it gets expanded, and it shows you the code. So you can keep on changing your code here, okay, and that will get reflected on the page. So I showed you the other way of creating the page. There you did not have a preview. So as a developer, practically speaking, or working on a practical assignment, you would always love to see the page while you write the code. You would just want to keep on making changes and preview the page also, and would like to see what actually is happening on the page. So that is the reason why I say this is the better approach of creating a page. Okay. All right. Now you can make small, whatever changes you want here. Hello. How are you? See? So whatever changes you make in the code, that appears on the page. Clear? Now if you look into this, it uses this tag h1, which is an HTML tag. H1 is an HTML tag, right? If you want to put a line break, you can use another HTML tag. Increase the font size. I put line break. Here I want to do a line break. So I have another HTML tag for line break, which I can use here. I told you we can use HTML tags here, right? I want to make it italics. I use another HTML tag. Right? Here. So this is how simple it is to create a Visualforce page. You just create the page, then you have the code editor, and you just have to start writing your code here and define what all markups you want to see on the page. So as per your requirement, you will just keep on creating the content for the page. All right. Okay. So now let's understand a few more terminologies for Visualforce, and then we'll get into a few examples of the Visualforce. Okay, just give me 1 second. Just hold on for a second. Hello. Yeah. Okay. So we have understood about the basic of the page, how to create a page. Now let's get into
Yes.
a few more concepts,
Yes.
okay, which we need to understand. So creating a Visualforce page is simple. Alternate way of creating a page, I told you, you can always go from setup, develop page new, and create your own page, right? So that is the other way of creating the Visualforce page. Now, let's look into the, what does my Visualforce page consist of? Okay. So a page definition consists of two primary elements. So there are two primary things which will be there on the page. One should be the Visualforce markups. Okay. The markup defines the user interface component. So all the UI components, or in other words, let me put it like this, whatever we can see on the page, or whatever we view on the page, that is the markup. Okay. That should be included on the page. So everything like the text, images, links, buttons, maps, whatever, right? So that is all markup. Okay. Table of data, or row of data, column, right? So the markup defines the user interface component that should be included on the page and the way they should appear. So markup not only defines some components on the page, it also controls the way they should appear. All right. So basically controlling the look and feel of them, and if you need a 2-column page, or you need a 1-column page, or you need a 10-column page, so that all completely depends on the markup thing. So that's the Visualforce markup part of it. The other primary element for a Visualforce page is a controller. So definitely we understand this part. As I was talking on the MVC framework concepts, that controller is basically set of instructions. Now for my Visualforce pages also, I need certain set of instructions, like what happens when someone clicks on a button, what happens when a page is loaded, what happens when a page is reloaded, what happens when I click on a tab, what data is displayed inside a certain table, right? So all these instructions need to be supplied to the Visualforce page, right? Otherwise markups cannot do anything on their own. So that element is called controller. Okay, so ideally every Visualforce page should have a controller, though you can definitely have Visualforce page without a controller. Like if you look into this page at this point of time, there's a Visualforce page and it does not have any controller. It just has simple static markups, so no controller, nothing to be controlled, no actions to be done and stuff like that, right? So you can have Visualforce page without a controller, only with markups, but that is a very rare scenario, very rare scenario. You will almost not have that any point of time. Okay. So Visualforce controller is basically a set of instructions that specify what happens when a user interacts with the components specified in the associated Visualforce markup. So what happens when the user interacts with the markups or with the components of the Visualforce page? That is the controller. That is what a controller does. Okay. Such as when a user clicks on a button or a link. Controllers also provide access to the data that should be displayed in the page. So controller not only controls the actions, it also controls what data will be displayed on the page. Okay. Whether all the records will be displayed on the page, or whether records which meet a certain criteria, they will be displayed on the page, that is also controlled using the controller. So that logic or that instruction is also supplied in the controller, right? So it's pretty simple. So two primary elements of the Visualforce page: markups and controllers. All right. So everything that we see on the page is markup. All the instructions that are defined are controllers. Right. Okay. Now let's understand a little more about Visualforce controllers. Okay. So we have different types of controllers which can be used in Visualforce. Though I will be talking about each type of controllers in details, but I will just want you to have a little overview of the controllers that we have in Visualforce. Okay. So the first and the most common type of controller which can be used in Visualforce is standard controller. Okay. Before I get into this, see, usually when I talk about controller and when I say set of instructions that specify what happens when a user interacts and all this stuff, the default thing that comes into our mind is Set of instructions means we will write those instructions, and we'll have to define the instructions, right? We'll have to give those instructions. That's not true. It's not always that we need to write the controllers and we need to write the instructions. We have an option of writing the instructions, and we have an option of using the default controllers, the ones which have been created by salesforce.com, the ones which are used by the standard Salesforce pages. So we can call them and use them as well, right? So there are different types of controller, primarily 4 different types of controller. The standard controllers. A standard controller consists of the same functionality and logic that is used for a standard Salesforce page. So standard controller, like for other things you must have seen, that Salesforce has standard and custom concept for everything. Standard object, custom object, standard field, custom field. So that way you have controllers also, standard controllers. So standard controllers are the ones which are already defined by Salesforce, which are already existing, and these are the ones which are used by the Salesforce standard pages. Okay, and it consists of the same functionality and logic. Okay, so the problem with the standard controller is that you will be limited to the functionality and logic of the standard Salesforce pages. Okay, but good thing about standard controller is that you really do not have to go and write your own instructions. This is ready-made. All right. Then there is a standard list controller. A standard list controller enables you to create Visualforce pages that can display or act on a set of records. Okay, so standard controller basically can deal with one record at a time. Standard list controller, as the name suggests, list, it can deal with multiple records at the same time. Okay, so it can create a page which can display multiple records. Okay, but functionality wise, the same standard functionality. So you are again restricted to the standard functionalities. You cannot put your own logics and stuff. Easy to use, but there are limited options, limited functionalities. So that's it. The third type of controller is the custom controller. What is the custom controller? A custom controller is a class written in Apex that implements all of a page's logic. Okay, so this is where we start writing our own logics. This is where we start writing our own instructions. Okay, so this is a class, okay, written in Apex. So this is written using Apex. So this is the place where we'll start using Apex. And this implements all of a page's logics without leveraging the standard controller. So it does not leverage any of the standard functionalities or any of the standard controllers. It simply uses the code that you're writing. Okay, so good thing is that you will be able to write your own logics. You will be able to control things the way you want. Slightly bad thing is that you will have to write everything on your own. So not as easy as a standard controller, but gives you the liberty to write your own instructions and use them the way you want. So if you use a custom controller, you can define new navigation elements or behaviors. So you can definitely control the behaviors of the buttons or navigation components that you have on the page, what happens when the page gets loaded and stuff like that. So you can control almost everything with a custom controller the way you want. And then the fourth type of the controller, which is a controller extension. A controller extension is a class written in Apex that adds to or overrides behavior in a standard or custom controller. So if you have to understand this fourth type of controller, you just have to understand the meaning of this word extension, right? Extension is if you already have a page which is using any controller, maybe a standard or a custom or a standard list. An extension controller can extend the functionality of that existing controller, right? So that is what an extension controller is. This is also a class written in Apex. So third and fourth controllers are written using Apex. First and second, we don't really have to write anything for that. We just have to call them. That's it. Okay. So that's about the controller thing. All right. So we have understood. I'll just give me a moment. Okay. So by now we understand a few things here. We understand what is Visualforce. We understand the development mode and how to enable that. We know how to create a page. We know two ways of creating a Visualforce page. Okay. We know how to create a Visualforce page, and we know elements of a Visualforce page, primary elements of the Visualforce page, which are markups and controllers, right? And we understand four different types of controllers, which are standard, standard list, custom, and extension. Fine. So by now we understand these things. Now there are a few more concepts which we are going to talk about. Okay. So primarily Visualforce has two more terminologies which you need to understand. One is component and one is an attribute. Okay, what is a component? Component is more like a tag. Remember HTML we call it tag. In Visualforce language we call it component. Sometimes we use the word tag also for it, right? So we call it components. So everything that you have on a page is a component, like a table, a button, a form, an input text area, an output text field, a hyperlink, an image, right? Everything is a component. So we have a lot of Visualforce components, as I told you earlier, that we, Visualforce supports the HTML tags also. So there are a lot of things which can be easily done using HTML tags, and we don't have Visualforce components for them. But there are a lot of Visualforce components that we have. For example, if I look into the page that we just created, this is the code of the page that we just created. In this apex page, this is a component. Okay, so this is more like a tag. It definitely has its own, we definitely have its own way of defining it here. It starts with an apex colon, okay, and this is a component. So at this point of time on this page, I just have one component, which is the apex page component. Okay, and apex page component is a must for any Visualforce page. This is a mandatory component. You cannot have a page without this component. Okay, so a page should always have this, and a page should always start with this component and end with this component. Correct? So this is one component. The same way you have a lot of these components, like the forms and the tables and the columns and the buttons and the links. But there are a lot of them. Okay, so everything is a component. All right. Then what is an attribute? Attribute is basically an attribute that controls the behavior of the component. Okay, attribute, every component has certain attributes. Okay, like for example, we'll just take this simple example that we already have on the screen. This is my page and I have a page component for it, right? If you don't want to see the sidebar for this page, as simple as that. If you don't want to see the sidebar for this page, then what you should do? There's an attribute which is called sidebar. An attribute for this page component which is called sidebar. I can make it false. So this is the attribute and apex page is the component. Clear? Now if I save it, this is where you need to save the changes. If I save it, the sidebar will be gone because I have made sidebar false. If I don't want to see this header also, then that is another attribute. Make it false. So every component has certain attributes, and we define attributes to control the look and feel of the component, how the component appears on the page. To control that, we use these attributes. Alright, now you see your Visualforce page does not have a sidebar, it does not have a header, right? So this way is whatever components we are going to use here, every component has certain attributes. Okay, and different components have different set of attributes. That's quite understandable. But attributes help you control the markups of the components easily. All right. I delete all this. Save it. Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, I think I lost connection for a minute. All right. So components and attributes also we understand, right? So there are a lot of components which are already there. Visualforce provides us with a lot of components, and it also gives you an option to create your own components. But that is something which we will do at a later stage. We will initially work with the existing components. All right. Now this is my page. I have created the page, and I've seen how do we put the components and the attributes. So Apex page component, as I told you, will be there by default for every Visualforce page. This has to be there. Apart from this, whatever you need, you just put that. Other things you can just remove and just put things as per your requirement. Yeah, Vanilla, are you asking some question, Anita? No. Okay.
No, I didn't ask him.
Okay. Okay. No problem. So now what we are going to do is, we are gonna bring in a standard controller on this page. Okay, so we'll start with the most basic controller. I told you about 4 controllers. So let's bring in the controller on this page. Okay, so how do you decide on the standard controller? If you want to create a Visualforce page which has to display data from one object, then we should use a standard controller. Okay. So let's get into the standard controller thing. Let's understand a standard controller quickly. A Visualforce controller is a set of instructions that specify what happens when a user interacts with the component specified in the associated Visualforce markup. A standard controller exists for every Salesforce object. Alright. So whatever Salesforce objects we have, standard as well as custom, for every object there is a standard controller which exists. Okay. So you just don't have to do anything. You just have to call the object name as a standard controller. And a controller is an attribute of the page component. So we have seen that Apex page is a component, right? Controller is an attribute of a page component. Got this? So this is defined as an attribute of the Apex page component that we see here. So standard controller, if you have to define it, should be defined here as an attribute. Standard controller equals account. If I say this, basically this page starts using the standard controller for the account object. I told you Salesforce has a standard controller for every object. So if I define standard controller equals account, it starts using the standard controller of the account object. Or in other words, you just hello. Yep. So when you define the standard controller as an attribute to the page, you have to define, if you're calling the standard controller, we'll have to define it as an object name, right? So the moment you say standard controller equals account, it starts using the standard controller for account. Okay, so the standard controller which Salesforce uses for account. If you find these terminologies a little difficult to understand, simple word, understand. if I say standard controller equals account, this page gets connected to the account object in the backend. So this standard controller basically connects it to one of the objects in the backend database in the model layer, right? So now what will happen, since I've connected it with the account object, I can bring in the data from the account object on this page. I can store data from this page into the account object. I can edit the data from that object, right? But if I have defined standard controller equals account and I want to try editing a contact or displaying the data from some other object, that will not work, right? So this is the limitation with a standard controller, that you'll have to define one object and you can use that page only for displaying or editing or saving or entering the data into one object, right? So that is how it works. Alright. So that's how we call a controller, as an attribute to the Apex page component. Got it? So hope you were able to understand the concepts that we discussed today. Tomorrow once we meet, we are gonna create a few examples using the standard controller. We will call the data and we will also learn how can we actually edit the data in the table, right? So we'll get into that in tomorrow's session. Please let me know if anyone has a question and whatever we have discussed today, and if you want to just quickly ask that. Any questions, doubts? Please
I'm
feel free
good.
to ask. You're good? Great. Srinivas, how about you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. So tomorrow once we meet, we start discussing on examples of how do we bring in the data, display the data, and edit the data, stuff like that. All right.
Yeah, Jeep, this
Okay.
Sujit,